arms towards the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know the truth, and the truth is love, yes it is. Wasn't what they said to you, or anything that you learn from a book or from the news. It's not like that, 'cause it's a thing. It is something that you do.
Hello, everyone. This is Jeremiah Hosea. Welcome to the Bassline. This is a special edition of the Bassline, you might say. I had the pleasure of interviewing Brook Jackson on Friday, and you might have noticed that show was not uploaded Monday, which is a first. We had a technical problem. The show was not recorded for some mysterious reason. It's never happened before. But it's given me a chance to meditate a little bit and think about what I learned in my first interview with Brook. And we're basically going to give it another go. Brook is kind enough to join me this Tuesday afternoon, and we're going to discuss her case and other things. And I think it's really important that we get the word out about what she witnessed, what she experienced, and the case Brook Jackson versus Pfizer, which is really not discussed enough considering the magnitude of what was revealed. So, Brook, thank you, first of all, for joining me again. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I'm really excited to do our replay interview, our take two, if you will.
There you go. I was going to say that. Take two. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me again. It was nice to talk to you just kind of before we started recording. Just
yeah,
chatting.
Absolutely. You're a super cool person. I could tell that
You
right
too.
away. And it's actually been a wonderful thing. I have to say, I've met a lot of really wonderful people through the medical freedom movement. It's sort of reshuffled the deck a little bit. You lose friends, you meet new friends, and the new friends are so valuable because we realize some of the same things that have unified us.
That's a good point. Yeah, you're right. I definitely have met some amazing people, and I guess that's probably one of the top things that I'm going to take away from all of this is just the people that I've met. I feel like my heart's gotten bigger, especially through the people you mentioned earlier, Danielle. There's so many people that I've met that I just want to help them. And, you think your government would want to do that too, but that's not where we're at.
So callous. I mean, the callousness that's been displayed is unimaginable. So I wanted to start off the way we did live on Friday, which is, can you just mention, and of course I already know the answer, but to what extent have you been interviewed by major media, by corporate media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox? Have any of those networks had you on for an interview?
They have not, no, but not from a lack of trying on my part. I've emailed them. I've reached out on Twitter or X now, and no, I haven't been interviewed by anybody mainstream. It's just been, I feel like brave and courageous independent journalists like yourself, who've taken the time to understand just how big this story is. Not to brag or anything. There's certainly nothing to brag about.
No,
but
it's objectively a big deal.
Right. And that kind of went on. That went on. It's still going on, obviously, but I feel like there was a little breakthrough about maybe 6 months ago. I did have one, what I would consider mainstream reporter reach out to me for an interview, and that was, oh gosh, he's a personality on Fox News. Oh, come on, help me out here, Jeremiah.
Tucker Carlson.
No, he took it. No. I did reach out to Tucker. He didn't return any of my emails.
That's strange. Gutenberg. I don't know.
Jesse Waters. Apologies. Oh, okay. Jesse Waters, production crew, did reach out to me for an interview, and it was probably my mood because maybe I was moody this day. I don't know. But I thought, you know what? How many times have I reached out to you guys over the years trying to get this story out? And you've had no interest at all. And now you want to talk to me. That's great. But I just didn't feel like I wanted to give them the time. I could find somebody else, in our movement to do the interview and, help them out because, so many of you guys have lost your jobs or whatever.
Yeah.
But then now I'm kind of kicking myself because for so long, my mission was to just get the information out. If people just understood how these clinical trials were run, maybe it would give them pause, to potentially reconsider taking the shot. So now I'm kicking myself. So maybe he'll have me back on one day, or my attorneys, either one of them, Robert Barnes or Warner Mendenhall would be great. So yeah. But no, that's a good question. No mainstream media other than that. No CNN.
It's actually interesting. A great Substacker and someone who I consider a hero in all of this. Actually, my next Substack or a forthcoming Substack is a written interview with the great Mark Crispin Miller, the NYU professor who was maligned for just asking some basic questions and encouraging his students to do some basic questioning of what was going on. And they quickly went after him. And, there's a whole story about that. But he recently made a good point, which is he doesn't use the term mainstream media because he feels that their agenda is increasingly not mainstream. And that's sort of their goal, is to turn sort of odd ideas and odd concepts into a mainstream concept, which they're not. So I think that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Corporate media, they're corporate media. They're not mainstream. They're pretending they're mainstream, but we shouldn't give them that credit, probably.
You're absolutely right. Or he is absolutely right. Yeah. Good point.
So let's talk about quickly before we get into some of what you observed that led to this very significant court case. What is your background again as a clinical research professional? I mean, you're an auditor as well, right? What are your credentials in that? Very experienced.
Well, it was mainly through just on the job experience. My degree is in business administration, and I was considering going to pharmacy school. And then that kind of changed when I became involved in a clinical trial. I was actually a participant and got offered a position with a gastroenterologist at our teaching hospital or teaching school here. It's the UT Southwestern Medical School here in Texas, and started working as a coordinator. You can think of a coordinator as almost like a medical assistant. So I started coordinating clinical trials in gastroenterology and in hepatology. And then quickly moved up through the ranks, I guess, and became a clinical trial manager and a director of operations for a very similar company to the one that we're going to talk about, Ventavia. And in my director position, I'd been at this position for about, I don't know, it was close to 5 years or so. And when COVID became a thing, I was traveling so much and working so much and, working on the PCR machines and the, testing and validating those. And to be honest, I was just, you hear about nurses and doctors who kind of get burned out. That's where I was. I was just ready to take on a role that, to be honest, just was had less responsibility. And I was ready to be home with my kids and, be a mom and a wife again. And so I hit the job boards and found a regional director position at a company called Ventavia Research Group, and interviewed over the course of a couple of days and was offered a position and accepted. In the middle of August of 2020 is when I accepted the position. And I started with them in September of 2020. They were a small company. They were working on lots of vaccine clinical trials, but specifically, I was brought in for my experience in COVID. Like I said, I was doing that before, validating the PCR. I worked on the early stages of some remdesivir studies. And I was eager. We talk about this a lot, like our journey, where we were then and where we are now. I'm totally different in my way of thinking. And so I was eager to bring my experience and my expertise to Ventavia and go into this company and audit the Pfizer clinical trial. They were a high enrolling site, meaning, they enrolled a bunch of patients into the clinical trial prior to my hiring. And so walking in on day one, my start date was, September 8th of 2020. So they were still, in their phase 3, still enrolling patients into Pfizer's COVID vaccine trial. And I had a lot of work to do from day one.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. When I think of the timeline, even it was so right up to the deadline that they were just rushing this stuff out. It's almost kind of like a point of no return, right? It's like you've already set this thing in motion and they won't accept no for an answer. Like, were they really going to say, oh, look, there's a little fly in the ointment. Let's stop, what we're doing here. It's like, nope, the contracts have been signed. Time to go and make that money.
That's right. The contracts were signed, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but, this, so that your audience understands, and I'm sure most of them do, this contract between Pfizer is with the Department of Defense to develop.
You kind of went right to the punchline, right to the punchline. But yeah, that's what happened, folks. I mean, if you're not familiar, Sasha Lachipova has covered this. And that's what emerged from the trial. If we get right to the end of the movie, it was stated in court by Pfizer that they were acting exactly as instructed by the Department of Defense. I mean, the mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream media isn't interested in that. Sounds like a pretty enormous story to me. And seems like a pretty enormous fact for us to not be aware of it, considering what we've all been put through. So let's get to your experiences at the trial site. You witnessed all kinds of impropriety. You witnessed just incorrect procedure, basically, in a litany of ways. You only worked for them for 18 days before your termination.
That includes weekends. Yes,
right, I remember. 18 days, including weekends. And I'll kind of jump right to the punchline again, unfortunately, which is that you reported what you saw to the FDA, which was your job, and you lost your job then within 6 hours, which is just a very strange coinky-dink, if you might accept that to be such.
I haven't heard that in a long time. It's definitely a coinky-dink. A lot of what I saw at Ventavia was certainly...
And also, just to clarify, before you get into this, I just want to also make clear what we made clear on Friday, which I think is just an incredible thing, which is that technically you're not really a whistleblower. You were doing your job, what kind of atmosphere are we in where it's called whistleblowing when you describe what was not going correctly in a procedure and it was your job to do so?
Yeah, at that point, I certainly didn't think of myself as a whistleblower, but what I was going to say, when I walked into Ventavia, a lot of what I uncovered or discovered, however you want to describe it, was just sloppy, certainly.
Right.
But there was conduct in this in this clinical trial that should still to this day warrant a criminal investigation.
Right.
And it's not just Pfizer's clinical trial. They have been a part of vaccine clinical trials for a decade or more. So there are other products, other vaccines, other drugs on the market that used data from this tainted clinical trial site, and the FDA still needs to walk in there and inspect them. But they won't. They haven't. It's been, September 25th of 2020 when I called them, and then followed up that call with an email letting them know that they were, there was fraudulent activity going on here. They're collecting data that's falsified, fabricated. They're mixing up lab samples between patients. They're not reporting adverse events that are happening. I mean, the list I have goes on and on. But again,
don't forget the site manager who was never there, who was always supposed to be there, right?
Oh yeah, so that's the principal investigator. So in any clinical trial at any site, and there were 153 clinical trial sites total for Pfizer's phase 3 trial, 131 of those in the United States. I was overseeing 3 of those, 2 directly. But the principal investigator is the study doctor that's overseeing the safety, the welfare of every single one of these patients. And he's ultimately responsible for everything that happens there. He signs a form it's an FDA 1572. And that's his promise to the government that he's going to do and oversee these trials like he said he was. And he was rarely on site, Jeremiah. I mean, I met the man in those 18 days twice. And I'll tell you, the first time that I met him, I was actually in the clinic walking down it. It was a very small clinic. We only had 5 rooms. And that was part of the problem, is that we were enrolling. So many patients there was so much fear about this virus that people were just lined up down the street to have the opportunity to participate in this trial. But we didn't have the space, nor did we have the staff that was qualified to
run
this.
You said staff that was extracted from the retail industry and from the restaurant industry, correct?
That's right. And I don't mean to bring that up to,
belittle those people. No, not at all. It's just a different wheelhouse, right? You wouldn't send someone right out of a laboratory and say, hey, go wait a table. I mean, they'd at least need a training at the restaurant, or probably a few days of training, ideally.
Well, these are medical procedures. When you're mixing a drug like Pfizer's vaccine, and that's always in quotes, right? You just have to have some experience, not just walk in from the taco stand where you were working days before and start drawing up, mixing, and injecting patients with an investigational product. I've just never seen anything like that. And I didn't even, when she introduced herself to me, I was introduced to her as our secretary. I mean, she was working the front desk, and then in between that, answering phones and checking in patients, she was running in the back and drawing up medication. And so when I saw her CV and also noted that she had no medical background, that gave serious pause, obviously. And I went directly to the owners of the company and I said, this is unacceptable. We do not have even a registered nurse on site. Our medical doctor who's overseeing the safety of these patients is not here. Who is going to give a dose of epinephrine, for example, if we have somebody who has an allergic reaction? And then that led me to go check on our crash cart, our emergency medications, which our epinephrine was expired. We had no Benadryl, we didn't have any epinephrine actually, and the Benadryl was expired. Bicarb was expired. The medications just were out of date, and we didn't even have access to it. It took me a while to actually hunt this crash cart down, which should be readily available to me. I should be able to look and find it and be able to act quickly.
Yeah.
So all these things, besides the sloppiness, I mean, we were putting patients' lives at risk, and there was just no accountability. And when I'm auditing the data, and I actually watched somebody on my staff fabricate and falsify a blood pressure reading. And you may say, oh, well, how many other patients did they lie about? And we're human, we make mistakes. And that's why you have audits and internal audits and sponsor audits and FDA audits. It's what should have been done. But instead of doing that, my company wanted to hide the fact that we were unblinding patients. So in this trial, patients should not have known whether they received the active drug or a placebo. And that wasn't the case here. Everybody knew what they were potentially knew what they were getting, the staff, the patients. And that just injects a bias into the study that you don't want. It can affect, for patients, how they report their symptoms, and it can affect the doctors, the principal investigators, for example, when they're determining whether a patient needs to be evaluated for a symptom, whether they think that's COVID related or injection related. So, I mean, it's just a bias you do not want in your trial. And when I discovered that around the 16th of September, I immediately recommended that Ventavia pause enrolling any more patients. And that was one of the things that, in this trial that I thought was really strange, was that Pfizer had direct contact with my staff. Like the site liaison at Pfizer had the personal cell phone number of many of my staff. And I stopped that when I found that out. If there's something that you need, Pfizer, you can call me for that. My staff are busy, and I just felt it was inappropriate to be contacting them on their personal devices.
Yeah.
So that was something that stood out to me, was just the relationship that they had with this company. But back to the 16th or 17th of September, whenever it was, when I discovered that they were unblinding all the patients, I said, we have to stop enrolling in this trial, and we need to contact Pfizer, because per their protocol, so the trial had this protocol. Think of it as like an instruction manual. You follow it to the T. Any deviation from that protocol, you have to report it to Pfizer. You have to report it potentially to a regulatory body that's overseeing the trial. And then we need to look at it internally and find out, why did you deviate from the protocol? Is it something in our standard operating procedures that we can change? So they wanted to hide that. And they actually started removing source documentation from patients' charts. And again, that's just, it's fraud. You cannot do that.
Right.
And so, after the call and the email to the FDA on the 25th, it literally took, and this is what we think happened. We can't say this for sure. And this is why one of the reasons why discovery in this case would be important, is so that we can show that we believe that when I contacted the FDA, that the FDA contacted Pfizer, and Pfizer contacted Ventavia. And because of that, I lost my job.
Yeah, it certainly seems that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when they gave you their very vague explanation that you're not a good fit, just very generally speaking, if I'm not mistaken, that was just their vague, non-specific explanation.
Reason for termination.
For terminating, right? So how long did it take you to deliberate of yourself and decide this is something that justifies legal action? How long did it take for you to to file your lawsuit after being terminated?
Well, I was terminated in September. I filed the lawsuit in January, but it wasn't, it didn't take me long, just like it didn't take me long to decide to, contact the FDA. I did have a conversation with my husband the night before I contacted the FDA, and I said, hon, this might cost me my job. If Ventavia finds out that I contacted the FDA and, basically called their baby ugly. That's how my
Right.
husband described it.
Right.
I was likely going to lose my job, and I just felt so strongly about this data needing to be backed by integrity and truthful collection of data points and real research. And I'd never seen anything like this before, guys. I've been in research for going on 25 years now, and never have I seen such a disaster. I've never been a part of a clinical trial that scared me until I was overseeing these.
Right. And I mean, let's not forget, safe and effective was the mantra they repeated ad nauseum, which I pointed out on various occasions is a contradiction in terms because it's an emergency use authorization, meaning we do not have certainty in regard to the product. So to make this definitive statement, safe and effective, it's not honest. It's not possible to say that with certainty. But when we hear about what you witnessed, it becomes really scandalous that we were being steered to take these products when
safe and effective is a false claim, which is exactly why I filed my lawsuit.
Exactly.
And I say my lawsuit. This is, we kind of joked about this earlier. This is a lawsuit that I filed. It's mine, I guess. There is a part of it that is mine, and that is because I was wrongfully terminated. And under False Claims Act statute, there is a component that is for whistleblower retaliation. And so that piece of it is mine. If I'm successful in proving I was wrongfully terminated for contacting the FDA, that money's going into my bank account. Okay.
Right.
I have.
Could you donate to the Bassline? Could you become like our sponsor?
Of course. But the other part, the false claim, like you said, this narrative, safe and effective, I knew there was no way they could make that claim knowing that they used faulty data.
Right.
How could they say that? And I was flabbergasted. I was dumbfounded, however you want to pick your adjective. I just couldn't believe, one, that I'd contacted Pfizer, that I tried to reach out to them to no avail. Interestingly enough, they did contact me the day after I was fired. And then about a week later had their, he's been described as their cleanup guy. This guy named Mark Barnes, who's actually, he's kind of a big deal in the legal world. But that's how he was described to me, as a cleanup guy, and had him reach out to me and make multiple phone calls.
In a surprising manner.
Yeah. And it was the way that he did it, right? It was like back-to-back phone calls, text messages.
Bypassing any proper procedure in contacting you, right?
Yeah.
Startling you when you're with your family.
Yeah, I felt like it was a way that he could intimidate me, or Pfizer could intimidate me.
Right.
Yeah, but the False Claims Act piece of this, it's the American people's tax dollar that I'm trying to get back, and justice for the people that have been hurt by this. That's what keeps me in this fight, or movement, whatever. However you want to describe it.
All of the above.
Yeah, I've met so many amazing people who've lost their family members, their children, and I try to put myself in that position, as hard as it is. I don't want to think about either one of my children not being here.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, but like I've been in a building with somebody describing, trying to through their trying to catch their breath and through their tears describe how that feels, and I want justice. And part of me is mad too, I'll be honest.
And you have every
I've
right
never
to
been
be.
fired before. I've never been fired before, and I'm kind of pissed off about it, you know?
Right.
Um,
Especially considering you did absolutely nothing wrong. Actually,
didn't do
what you
anything
did was right.
Yeah.
What would have been
And
wrong is if you didn't do what you did. That would have been a wrong action.
and I think back to the time. So this is September of 2020. It wasn't as hard then to do the right thing as it is now. But I think that here we are all these years into it. And at some point, like, silence is betrayal. And you just have to speak up. Would I recommend being a whistleblower? I guess it depends on the day that you ask me.
Right. Sure,
because
it's not a
I kind of,
picnic.
it's no picnic, certainly, and I feel like I'm right where I'm supposed to be because it's where I'm supposed to be and why, someone put me here because I
Yeah.
have thick skin and I feel like I can handle it, but it is not.
It's trying.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's hard is that, I should have the full support of my colleagues in clinical research, doctors, irregardless of whether or not you believe in this product's safety and effectiveness. But we're talking about clinical trial fraud here.
Yeah.
And you should support me no matter how you feel about the drug.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, that's the irony. And actually, attorney Sujata Gibson, who led.
Oh, I love her.
Oh, yeah, she's awesome. She's been a guest on the
And
Bassline.
she's from New York.
Yeah, exactly. So I had her on, and she was discussing the landmark victory that she was a part of on behalf of the New York State healthcare workers. And she made exactly that point, which is if you're pro-vaccine and pro-medication and pro-pharma in this manner, as so many people are demonstrating themselves to be, well, that would sensibly require that you invest in the legitimacy of the regulatory process. It would mean that these things are handled correctly and that you would want them to be handled correctly, not rushed through, not done in a fraudulent manner. Like they're missing the gist of their own political stance. Basically, they're pro-medical intervention, but you're not pro the process that assures that these products are safe. That doesn't make any sense. You should be at the forefront of demanding these things are regulated properly if you're so pro-vax as people have identified themselves to be.
Absolutely. So it's been a long journey to date. Frustrating at times, but I just have the best support. My attorneys are amazing, and I'll tell you, it does feel really good when the time or two that I've been in court, just to be able to look Pfizer's attorneys in their eye. It feels really good to know that I did the right thing, and why. I don't know. I can hold my head up high. I have integrity. I feel like I'm an example of what integrity is. I have integrity. That's it. There's nothing. I'm not a hero or anything like that. I thought my job was important. I knew my job was important, and I just have a little bit of integrity. That's all it takes.
Well, that's incredible. We're all very proud of you for that, honestly. And now I want to get into the case itself and the unbelievable events of the case. So I asked you on Friday, what went wrong in court? You had a rock solid case. I mean, there was nothing to dispute what you had seen firsthand. What went down in court? It's rather incredible what Pfizer's legal defense was. Could you describe what occurred in court?
Sure. No, I think you just made a perfect statement. There was nothing to dispute. You're right, because it wasn't Brooke's story. I didn't just come with an allegation. I came with documentation, and it wasn't mine. It was Pfizer's. It was Ventavia's. I'm presenting their own fraud to you based on their documentation of it. So, the case was dismissed in March of 2023 after we, went through all these different filings, these briefs, these meetings. I mean, just hundreds of hours of work, which, by the way, my attorneys are doing pro bono. Like I haven't paid 1 cent towards this False Claims Act case. They've just been amazing.
That's commendable.
Yeah, so commendable. And these they're great. They're just great. But he dismissed the case based on Pfizer's defense, which was that they didn't necessarily have to do a clinical trial, that it's, how can I explain it? I'm trying to come up with a good punchline and not use Sasha's.
Yeah, right. It's all right. She's our friend. You can.
Yeah, she is. And I love her so much too. But they didn't have to conduct this clinical trial. The fraud that I saw was irrelevant. All they had to do was bring an FDA approved product, or authorized or approved product to market. And those were the terms.
Right.
So bring us a product that gets FDA approval, and we, the DoD, will pay you for that. You don't have to follow any rules in the conduct of your clinical trial, in your manufacturing process, in the delivery of it. Just bring us something that has an FDA stamp. There you go. That was good.
Yeah. Wow. And see, one goal that I want to achieve through this program is I want the listener to be able to recapitulate the story of Brook Jackson versus Pfizer in its basic outline to other concerned citizens and other parties of interest. We should all be able to describe the problem of what happened here, because it's fundamental and something that's frustrated me. You could read about my opinions about the social atmosphere we're in various Substack articles I've written, but it's so ironic and so annoying, honestly, that people such as myself have been labeled conspiracy theorists for doing the opposite, for pointing to nuts and bolts things, to, pointing to actual factual information that can't be disputed, can't be refuted whatsoever. It's like, once we put the name calling aside, is anyone going to care to address these facts?
Right.
That, it's like, and it's interesting because it's like, when you call someone a conspiracy theorist, and I don't have a problem with the label, honestly, sure, I'll theorize about conspiracies. What's the big deal? But, it's funny because when you use that term, you're calling someone a freak, basically. But as I pointed out, it's freakish to call everyone a freak, even when they present credible information or things that should just be considered in an intelligent manner. It's like, no, you're the one going afield using these terms to label people, when these are factual things that we all need to just take the time to comprehend the implications of this.
Absolutely. You call me a conspiracy theorist, an anti-vaxxer, and anti-government like it's a bad thing.
Right. And that's the other thing as well, is that, you're a person who by no means was a quote unquote anti-vaxxer. You believed in pharmaceutical intervention up to a certain point. You were a member of the industry that, as we were discussing before we went on air, you participated in trials for products that saved people's lives. You believed in the work that you did. So,
yeah, I've seen research do amazing things. I feel like when I look back, the best part of my career was when I worked in liver and kidney transplant. To see, just the process of somebody losing a loved one and then, giving the gift of life to somebody else. I mean, in the research setting, it was amazing. And I'll always be thankful for that time there. And like you said, I was never really for or against anything. I just felt like, you had this relationship with your provider, and if you needed a medication, maybe there's one for you. Maybe you need to have, a tough look in the mirror and make some lifestyle changes. But never have I been through anything that's been mandated before. So that was really something.
Yeah.
And that's eventually what made me not necessarily break the seal, because when I filed this case, because it's a federal False Claims Act case, and I was alleging misbranding, that the product wasn't as safe, wasn't as effective as claimed because of fraudulent data that was used. And some people may say, well, there were 153 clinical trial sites. Your site only enrolled approximately 1,000 patients of the total 44,000. What does it matter? Well, it matters for a couple of reasons. One, if this type of I don't even know how to describe it anymore. If this type of conduct was happening at a little clinical trial site here in Texas, 3 of them, what else was happening at the other 150 sites? Right? It made me beg the question. If it's happening here, where else is it happening? And 2, the emergency use authorization was based on 170 patients out of that 44,000 who developed COVID-like symptoms, at least one of them, and had a positive PCR test. That's it.
Right.
And an average of 2 months of safety data. Okay. So 170 people changed the world.
Wow.
That's it.
And then it came down to mice, right? For the next rounds of boosters. They said, oh, well, it worked so great the first time. Let's just test this on a couple of mice and call it a day.
Yeah. And that's what people don't understand. Because my research is complicated, not just the conduct of these trials, but the regulatory side of it is a whole other area of that you really have to have expertise and to fully understand. But like you were saying, because of the emergency use authorization, the safe and effective, they're able to base future studies on what we call a bioequivalent. So, they don't have to necessarily do these large scale, gold standard randomized double-blind trials anymore. They can just base it off of, animal data or, smaller studies. So that is a huge problem. And I think eventually when we get past this, is it really safe? Is it really effective? Congress has got to make some changes to, to our regulatory standards. I mean, we've got to do something. And there's others out there in public health and, in the space that are smarter than I am and can, come up with better ideas. But I have some in just the conduct of the trial, right? And that's a whole other animal, and how the data is collected from patients, and then how it gets to Pfizer, for example, and then how Pfizer gets that data to the FDA to review. It is, it's scary. It's scary how the FDA determines a product's safety and efficacy. It would really blow your mind. If we had time, I would go into more detail, but anybody can look it up on the FDA's website. They rely on the data from a pharmaceutical company to determine a product's safety and efficacy.
Wow. Yeah,
it's right there in black. It's right there in black and white. And so if the FDA does not go to a clinical trial site to inspect what data points the site has collected and then compare that to what Pfizer, for example, has reported, the FDA will never know the truth.
Right.
They will never know.
Right. I mean, agency capture is one of the many terms I've become familiar with throughout this whole ordeal. And it's a really fundamental problem in our society. And it seems worst of all in the pharmaceutical industry, which is something that pertains
Right.
to
But it's
our
everywhere,
social
right?
health. Right.
And I think the pharmaceutical, what we've learned through this experience has kind of opened our eyes to other places it's happening.
Yeah.
And it really is systemic
Well, and
and
I
something
also,
else
as
we
you were
have to change.
speaking, I've been thinking this the entire time as you're describing this. I come from the experience of being a performing artist. I'm an electric bass player. I've been on a lot of stages. I perform with a lot of different bands.
I know. I listen to your music.
Oh yeah, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And it's like a lot of the times you're in a big production and people don't realize what happens behind the scenes, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally known. Hey, maybe police officers, for example, don't always speak in a professional manner in their locker room. Maybe you saw a band and you think everything is perfectly well rehearsed. Well, no, one of the songs in the set, they just rehearsed it right before they jumped on stage. Or, there's any number of kind of loose things that go on in human environments. And we would like to think that's not happening in a medical setting, as it pertains to medical products that will be administered. We like to think that little looseness that happens in a locker room or whatever wouldn't happen, but it sounds just very loose, very shoddy. And then it gets the stamp of approval as this perfectly legitimate thing that occurred. I mean, how are people not upset by that? We should all be upset, because something that's also occurred to me throughout this whole experience is, wow, we base this whole system on trust. I walk into an office. I don't know who the doctor is. I don't know what substances are in this needle that's going to be injected into me, into my child. I trust that the regulatory process that brought this product into the lives of my family, that it's been regulated properly. And to find out that it's not, that there are really concerning things going on, there are unprofessional things, there are things that compromise the data as it pertains to this product. How could we not be concerned by this? I mean, are we just zombies?
More than just concerned.
Right,
People
exactly. More
should be
than
afraid.
concerned.
Afraid.
People should be afraid. Absolutely right. But I just wonder, can we snap out of it, everyone? Can we please wake up and understand how serious this is? Can we stop with the name calling, the red coat versus blue coat nonsense, and just say, hey, we are all members of a society and we need to take responsibility for these things for the sake of future generations. If not for ourselves, please, for the sake of future generations, for goodness sake.
Well, since you brought up color, red and blue, I'll bring up another two, and that's black and white. And it's either right or it's wrong. It's black or it's white. And that's how I saw, what Pfizer was doing, what Ventavia was doing, what Icon was doing was wrong. It was so black and white to me.
And again, just to specify for this recording, because we specified in the live recording, Icon, certainly not to be confused with ICAN, the Informed Consent Action Network.
That's right. ICAN, good. Icon, bad. And, through the years, and maybe even before, there's always so much research that you can do. But Icon, ICON, is now a government, what do they call them? A strategic partner in pandemic preparedness.
Frightening sounding moniker.
I'll tell you, the research that I have done into the contract that Icon had with the Department of Defense in developing this drug, they lost their contracts. And I can't help but think that, this lawsuit that we have going on is part of the reason that they lost it. They lost this contract, but gained another. And that was something else too, that I kept warning the Department of Justice about as this case remained under seal for 14 months, was that Ventavia is participating in other vaccine trials. Hello, somebody please listen to me. There are people that are losing their unborn babies because of Ventavia's carelessness or
malfeasance.
Yes. Or, maybe it's the drug that's being injected into them.
Right.
We warned the DOJ about Ventavia participating in Pfizer and GSK's new RSV vaccines that have recently gained approval. Ventavia participated in those trials. They've participated in pneumococcal vaccine studies, and those drugs are currently available on the market. Several of our childhood vaccines that are currently on the CDC's immunization schedule. So somebody should get out to Ventavia pronto and see what's going on. And I am shocked that it hasn't happened. But I'll tell you, moving forward with what happened with this lawsuit, Pfizer's defense was all they had to do was, get FDA approval. It didn't stipulate in the contract that they had to follow any regulatory guidelines or, federal acquisition regulations. We didn't have to do that. So
Right.
that was their defense. And the judge, based on what we believe is a misinterpretation of the contract, because it's wordy. It is with the Department of Defense again for the, prototype vaccine that they developed. And maybe what Brook said is true. They've never, Pfizer nor the Department of Justice have ever come out and said, we believe Brook is telling the truth, or we don't believe her. She's lying. It's not true. They've never said one way or another, or made a comment about what I presented, the evidence that I presented, only that if it was fraud, it was just a little bit of fraud, and that's okay.
Right.
It's immaterial to the decision that the FDA made, because what's 3% of the overall 44,000 patients. It wouldn't have, those patients couldn't have affected the, efficacy of the product. But again, so your audience understands, that's based on 44,000 people. How many patients from Ventavia are made up of the 170 that actually determine this 95% effectiveness? And that data has never been ever been released. We don't know. Or maybe it's been, maybe it is now. I really haven't been online to look at that here in a while. With Christmas coming up and Thanksgiving and all that, but maybe there's a report now through now that we know that the ICANN FOIA production is complete. We have all the data that was used to support the FDA's decision from Pfizer. But that was the reason for the dismissal. Maybe it was fraud, but it was just a little bit. And the contract said that we didn't have to follow any of these protocol deviations or this fraud that was done.
Was that made clear to the American people? No, it was not.
No,
not at all. So we are reaching the home stretch here. Of course, in our live conversation, we had two delightful callers who were very encouraging and positive.
Yes.
We had Jerry from Michigan, so I want to shout out Jerry, and I want to shout out Sandy from Westchester. Thank you for calling.
I was going to say Sally. I was close. Yes, thank you both very much.
Yeah, thank you. But since we have a couple minutes and I'm not in studio, so we're not taking calls, what can you tell us? What do you know about the new lawsuit now with Texas, the state of Texas versus Pfizer? What do you know about that? Do you take encouragement from that being put on the table? Texas versus Pfizer. Maybe they'll have better luck than Brook Jackson.
Well, I just want to say that this we're not out of the game yet, and I keep saying my. It's our lawsuit. It's the American people's lawsuit. We were dismissed in March. We filed a motion for the judge to reconsider his ruling, and he did that in August. So he reversed the dismissal, and that really took us back to square one. So he allowed us, with his decision, to amend our complaint and add some additional claims that were not, in his mind, highlighted in our original complaint. We were able to bring forward information about the suppression of alternative therapy, such as ivermectin, hydrochloroquine. We have other people that have come forward that have worked at the clinical trial sites, other ones besides mine, patients that have come forward that were participants that have been harmed. So we were able to amend the complaint, make it more robust, highlight the, flaws that the judge pointed out. Pfizer has motioned to dismiss, obviously, and we have a response, or we have a reply. Sorry, there's like you file, then you have a reply, then a response, and then the judge will make his decision. So we will likely have oral arguments again. I'll be able to look Pfizer in the eye, or their attorneys, probably around March, I would say. And then we will wait for the judge to make his decision.
Right.
Hopefully with, if he follows fact and he follows law, we'll be able to move into discovery. And our potential trial date, I think I looked this up last time we were talking, is in 2025, if we make it that far. I don't believe that the DOD nor Pfizer will ever allow us to get into discovery, because you can imagine what that will uncover. I suspect, I know it will uncover more fraud. We need access to a lot of the data. I want to know when the FDA called. Well, we know, right? But I want to prove that the FDA got a hold of Pfizer and Pfizer fired me. I want accountability for that. But so fingers crossed, everybody. I do upload all the case documents on a website that I created just for that, to keep everybody updated. It's iambrookjackson.com, and you can read any of the case filings there.
And by the way, it's Brook as in Brook. It's not Brook with the E on the end. So
thank
don't
you.
get thrown off by
Thank
that.
you for clarifying that. Yeah, Brook without the E. So iambrookjackson.com. And, to answer your question, I'm encouraged by the Paxton, Texas lawsuit. There's a couple of, I guess I have a couple of comments. One, attorneys general have this incredible authority to intervene in our lawsuit. So any attorney general from any state can help us in this fight against Pfizer and intervene as a state. There are also about 30 state statutes that have state False Claims Act statutes, and I plan on bringing a state case in Texas and in Florida. Those are, two of the states that have really been, outspoken with regard to COVID policy, et cetera. And then maybe Louisiana and Missouri would be next. But Paxton, our lawsuit makes similar claims to his. So I encourage him to reach out to my attorneys. We've been trying to get a hold of him for quite some time. He'll slide into my DMs and ask me to retweet some of his stuff, but he'll never return my attorney's calls. So I'm kind of like, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure.
I wish people were a little more reciprocal in that sense,
Yeah. I mean, I support anybody who's speaking out against this fraud.
And you being on this show is proof of that, by the way.
Yeah, anybody. That's sweet of you to say. I've had, my thoughts on, for example, Senator Johnson. I'm just so thankful for the platform that he's given to people that have been hurt by this to just tell their story, because that's all they want to do is tell their story, to have some accountability and to get some help with, with their medical care. And my question is, while I thank you, sir, can you do more?
Yeah. Yeah, something I've known. It's funny. I've been aware of this phenomenon for so long because I'm an event producer and I bring musicians and put showcases together. Well, I have over the years. And, it's a tough thing to balance your emotions because you wind up getting frustrated at the people who showed up to help. You're like, you showed up, now do more. Yeah. But you don't have anger at the people who didn't show up at all. It's kind of like, how do we keep these people in here encouraged, but get them to do more, please?
No, I mean, that's me for sure. And I thank you for pointing that out, because I lose sight of that sometimes. But
it's a real frustration. I felt it, and it's a real problem too. Like, we actually do need you to do more. It's like, it's the person who just kind of gives them themselves a pat on the back for showing up to yoga class. It's like, well, now do the yoga well. Now push yourself. Don't cheat.
Yeah, but I'm like, how much more do you guys need to see? We have, this case in federal court claiming fraud in the clinical trials. You have Paxton, with his deceptive practice.
You have the VAERS system.
The VAERS.
Which they've completely ignored. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Pfizer's
it's a 5-alarm fire and they're not responding.
Pfizer's own data, showing that they were suppressing adverse events. They were suppressing deaths. So to get to a certain point so they could claim a certain, efficacy. We have all of the, there's so many papers over the last couple of weeks that have come out. There's a Mulroney et al. The problems just keep piling up, and there's the DNA contamination, the SV40 promoter. I mean,
one thing I wonder, this is a little kind of dream of mine, and I brought this up with Steve Kirsch in my discussion with him. And I don't know, if you'd have any thoughts about this, but what is preventing us, and when I say us, I mean the medical freedom movement, and perhaps your case specifically would be something we could rally around. Why can't we form a legal dream team? Why isn't Aaron Siri also representing you? Like, I thought generally as a kid, you have a lawyer and your lawyer represents you in court. And then there was the O.J. Simpson dream team. I'm like, wait a second, you could have like a bunch of lawyers representing you? Why don't we have that for the medical freedom movement? Why don't we get a nice team of superhero lawyers who are like the Avengers rolling up their sleeves and just fixing this stuff on behalf of the American people? Like, I wonder, is that possible in some way? Can we do that?
I actually asked that very question to, I don't want to call her out, but somebody very high up in children's health defense. Mm. And I probably had a couple martinis too many, but I was just so frustrated because, like you said, like, why isn't Aaron Siri helping me? I've known Aaron since 2021. I can't answer that question. Maybe he doesn't think that he can. I don't know, but right. I was frustrated. I was at this point, and I asked her, why are we not? Where's the dream team?
So this is like medical freedom inside baseball here, guys. Like, sorry to be like gossiping in any way, but yeah, I want to get Aaron Siri on my airwaves one day, and I'll ask him directly. But not just to put it all just on Aaron. He's just a high-profile attorney. I mean, I would love to see a nice team. I'd like to see them stand there.
He's freaking brilliant.
Oh yeah, like, he's phenomenal.
The dude is amazing. I mean, I like I said, I've known him since 2021. I can't wait for stuff to be, complaints to be made public that were written by Aaron Siri and his firm. They're exciting to read. Is just, he's fantastic. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. But back to the question that I asked, and it was answered in sort of a way that made sense. And it was that, if we put this whole dream team together, think about, the opposition, whatever you want to call them, we're like basically one target.
Okay.
Right.
So we don't be standing all in one place.
Yeah. And I guess I thought at the time, I was like, okay, I guess that makes sense. But, I'm with you. And that's another point I'll just make really quick. Robert Barnes and Warner Mendenhall, who are the leads and on my team of attorneys, they're kind of doing something like that, especially Warner. He had this idea last year to have a conference in Atlanta for just the attorneys. So, anybody could go. I was there. We had, just people that were in the area that were interested that came. So it wasn't just for attorneys, but, gather together. Let's talk about what's working, what's not working. How can we form some sort of alliance and, help each other out, have some shared database or something, and, where you can post questions and get really quick answers if you have a brief due or something. But Warner's doing that, and he actually has started. It's called Freedom Health Council.
He's an outstanding spokesperson, by the way.
He's so good. I know. When Warner's definitely the heart of my case. I've listened to him take on, and that's what we need. We need more attorneys. Gosh. But I've listened to him try like these really small, which they're small, but they're not insignificant, like employment cases. Somebody, there's this one story I'll tell you guys really quick. There was somebody that had worked for this hospital system for about 20 years, and she had an autoimmune disorder and had a medical exemption from the flu shot for as long as she'd worked for this hospital. Her doctor did not want her to take any sort of vaccination. So she had this exemption on file. When the COVID policy became mandatory, she thought, well, I already have this, so it would cover that, right? So her medical exemption would have covered the flu shot, would have covered the COVID shot. But she thought, I'm also a very religious person. And based on those convictions, I don't want to get, the COVID shot. I can't anyways, but I want to also file an exemption for my religious rights. And so she did that through her hospital system. And because she filed a religious and a medical exemption, it canceled them both out.
Wow.
And they fired her. And that was the hospital policy. How ridiculous
and and how outrageous, this whole thing of reviewing your religious exemptions. Like, no, that's my religion. End of story. It's not up to you to determine, I'm going to decide whether you believe in your religion or not. By what authority? I have a friend actually who works in a science laboratory who's a, research professional herself, who didn't want the shot, hasn't taken the shot. Has witnessed terrible side effects in some of her coworkers who have taken the shot. And, she had one of the best answers of all, where she just said, I can't take this for religious reasons. And they said, oh, what religion do you practice? And she just said, a voice from God told me. Mm-hmm. No particular religion. God told me in my head, don't take the shot. So it's like, that's, yeah, it's like, I don't need to cite religious texts. Maybe I don't believe in anything in particular. I just believe in God. So it's been a great conversation again, Brook. I thank you so much for joining us. It really is our honor. I hope to have you on the airwaves again sometime soon. How can people follow you on Twitter?
Oh gosh, it's the same as my websites. I am Brook Jackson. I'll tell you how I got that handle one day, Jeremiah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I thank you so much for being on the air with us, and I thank you so much for your bravery. And we have your back. We're super inspired by your courage. And yes, this is the people's lawsuit. We are, we are the spear, and you're the tip of the spear at this moment. So we thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me on and allowing me to tell this story. I feel like we were on a roll there. I could keep going and going, but I really want to come back.
We've already exceeded the 1 hour of our program, and I hope our listeners appreciate that. This is a
Just
baseline
speed up the volume.
extra.
Speed up the playback.
Yeah, normally we're confined by being on live radio, so we went overtime a little bit today. But this Friday, before I forget to mention, we have the great Ryan Christian of Last American Vagabond, and actually go back and check his interviews with Brooke. He's a really good friend of our program, and he did 2 outstanding interviews with Brooke. If you want to really get kind of immersed in this, because I just think it's so important that we understand what transpired in regard to your case, and make it so that among at least the concerned citizens, we're all clear on the basic description of what transpired in the Brook Jackson versus Pfizer case. It's of paramount importance. And I think anyone who's taken the time to listen to this program should agree to that, I would say.
And I was just going to add that you'll enjoy listening to Ryan. He's a great researcher.
Smart as a whip.
And the one that taught me to question everything.
Yeah, exactly. He's as sharp as a tack. And I'm really looking forward to my chat with him this Friday. And please stay in touch, Brooke. Our warm regards, my family's warm regards to your family.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll speak soon. And hopefully there'll be some good news for our team soon.
Stay tuned.
Yeah, exactly. Well, have a wonderful weekend, Brooke.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas, y'all.
You too. Thank you. Have a great whatever you're getting into next.
Thanks.
Peace.
Bye.
With open arms towards the sun, you feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, 'cause you know the truth, and the truth is love. Yes, it is. Wasn't what they said to you, or anything that you learn from a book or from the news. It's not like that, 'cause it's a thing. It is something that you do.